She edits secrets for a living, but now the game edits her. Sophie Laurent sat hunched over her laptop in the narrow apartment on Rue Saint-Jacques, Paris cold pressing against the window pane, faint streetlights reflecting off wet cobblestones. She had been editing manuscripts for nearly a decade, her work invisible to the world, her corrections shaping the words of others while she remained anonymous. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with precise rhythm, adjusting syntax, polishing narrative flow, ensuring that the author's voice remained intact yet flawless. She paused briefly, to stretch and glance at the stack of unfinished drafts beside her. Each one a story she had shepherded into life without acknowledgement, each one a silent testament to her skill. She sipped cold coffee, the bitterness grounding her in the quiet room. As she opened the forum under her pseudonym, North Atlas, the new message blinked on the screen. A name she had come to recognize as equally cautious yet intelligent. Without revealing photos or personal details, they had been speaking for weeks, sharing thoughts about literature, the invisible burdens of their lives, the loneliness that Paris' immense streets imposed, the delicate tension between ambition and anonymity. He wrote of characters he admired, of flawed protagonists who hid more than they revealed, of streets where lives intersected without notice, and Sophie responded, analyzing structure, psychology, motivation. Shearing through narrative to its core, he typed of solitude, the ache of anonymity in a city alive yet indifferent, and Sophie replied with quiet acknowledgement, describing nights spent alone, editing manuscripts while the city pulsed outside, her mind alive with characters and possibilities that would never bear her name. Each exchange sharpened their understanding of human behavior, of literature, of the fragile bridge they were building through words alone. The hours passed unnoticed, silence punctuated only by the tap of keys and the distant hum of street traffic. Sophie occasionally looked out the window, watching the slow drift of fog between rooftops, thinking of the stranger on the other side of the forum who might be observing the same scene, imagining someone else in an equally cramped apartment, typing words that connected with her without ever revealing a face. He typed, "Do you ever feel like the city is too vast to be alone?" Her fingers hovered briefly before she answered, "Every day that I navigate crowds of strangers who will never see me." A pause before he replied, "Yet we find each other here, in thought, in words, where presence is optional but connection is real." Sophie leaned back, heart quickening slightly, feeling the rare intimacy of a mind speaking directly to hers without physical proximity. She typed carefully, "Then words are safer companions than people, but sometimes more revealing than the masks we wear." He responded, "Exactly. Often what we hide in plain sight tells more than what we show." Sophie read the line twice, letting it sink in. She realized the depth of what they were building. Intellectual trust, emotional resonance, a bond invisible to the world but tangible to them both. They analyzed passages from modern novels, discussed character motivations, and speculated on literary theory, exchanging ideas about endings, themes, and the unseen forces that shaped stories. She sent a long post analyzing a draft she had been editing, explaining the subtle dissonances in pacing and tension. Her words precise yet instructive, he responded with insight, challenging her analysis, introducing perspectives she had not considered, their discussion deepening into hours of argument and reflection, never heated, always respectful, always cerebral. The night grew darker outside, the city quiet but alive, street lamps casting faint halos through misted windows. Sophie's apartment felt alive with the conversation, safe yet electric, her pulse quickening with anticipation of each reply, sensing without knowing that the other was equally engrossed in the dialogue, perhaps in another room, perhaps sitting as she sat, fingers poised over keys in the same way. Her phone buzzed with a new message, and she hesitated before reading. He wrote, "I think we both know that the words matter less than the minds behind them." Sophie's lips twitched into a faint smile. She typed carefully, "Perhaps, but the words are all we have for now, and that is enough." He responded almost immediately, "Enough for tonight, perhaps, but soon we must confront reality beyond the text." Sophie stared at the screen, imagining the vastness of Paris and the impossibility of connecting outside this controlled anonymity, yet feeling the quiet thrill of anticipation. of something dangerous yet exhilarating, something that might change everything when they finally met. She typed one last line before closing her laptop. Then we will see if the world allows it. She pushed the chair back, stretched, listened to the faint hum of the city below, and for the first time in weeks, felt that the solitude was not quite so empty, that the anonymity of her life had been pierced, not by a face, but by a mind that resonated with her own, silent, persistent, insistent, and utterly untraceable. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of the cafe in the Latin Quarter. Sophie Laurent pushing open the door, breathing in the scent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries. The streets of Paris buzzed faintly outside with commuters and tourists, oblivious to the precise tension building inside. She carried her notebook carefully, sliding into the corner table she had reserved mentally for herself for years, the same one near the window that gave her an unobstructed view of the street and allowed her to feel secure without being conspicuous. She had agreed to meet North Atlas today, though she knew only that he was a stranger, anonymity preserved in all exchanges up to this point. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the notebook and pen on the table, arranging them with habitual precision, her mind calculating angles, entries, possible interruptions, and the subtle nuances of human behavior that might betray identity. He arrived moments later, slipping through the door with quiet confidence, his presence unassuming yet immediately noticeable in the way he scanned the room, eyes briefly locking on hers before a casual nod acknowledged the meeting. He approached and paused, allowing Sophie to take in his appearance without pretense. Dark coat, neutral scarf, eyes alert but relaxed, hands tucked lightly in pockets, body posture conveying awareness without aggression. He spoke first, voice low, calm. "Sophie?" She nodded, heart quickening slightly, words almost caught in her throat. She gestured to the seat opposite her. "Yes, please." He slid into the chair with careful ease, the subtle scrape of the chair against the tiled floor barely audible. The first moments passed in silence, each sizing up the other, the mind noting details, gestures, inflections, small tells, all without breaking the polite facade. That he smiled faintly, acknowledging the strange familiarity built over weeks of anonymous messages. "It's different," he said. "Seeing you," she replied, keeping her tone measured but aware of the rapid pulse of her heartbeat. "Yes," he said. "I imagined something else, but this works." Their conversation began cautiously, first touching lightly on literature, then on Paris, then slowly moving to topics that revealed glimpses of personality, values, humor, intuition, and intellect. She found herself laughing once, twice, at observations that matched her own thought patterns, her chest lightening slightly from weeks of concentrated isolation. That he noticed the small smiles, the way her hands moved when emphasizing a point, the way her eyes followed her thoughts before she spoke. They shared anecdotes, reading habits, philosophical reflections, never straying into personal details beyond what could not betray anonymity, building a bridge of trust one sentence at a time. Nothing. Removal only. She maintained her composure, masking the shock behind a slow, deliberate sip of her cooling coffee. He noticed nothing, continuing to discuss editing trends, literary discovery, submission selection. That he laughed quietly at a shared memory of an obscure author, completely unaware of the storm he had just triggered in Sophie's mind. She realized suddenly that he was Thomas Dupont, the only son of the man whose publishing empire had long threatened the agency she worked for, the very agency where she shepherded manuscripts into life for years, where she had poured every ounce of skill and care. She felt a strange mixture of fascination, shock, anger, and fear, her chest tight, her mind racing to reconcile the gentle, intelligent man sitting before her with the family legacy that had so often been an obstacle. She smiled faintly, masking the revelation, hoping her composure remained intact. "That's interesting," she said carefully, choosing words that would not betray her awareness. He nodded, continuing, unaware of her internal recalculation of trust and threat. The conversation shifted subtly, now infused with an unspoken tension, she noting every gesture, subtle pause, eye movement, he unaware that each word carried double meaning for her now, that each reference to the literary world could be a trap or a test. She felt the room shrink slightly, aware of the delicate balance between the man she was discovering and the corporate legacy he represented. The coffee grew cold on the table, but neither reached for it. Lost in the intricate dance of words and perception, each mind racing, each trying to map the other without revealing too much, without losing the fragile connection built over weeks of digital conversation. He mentioned a visit to a bookstore they had both frequented, sharing details that aligned with her own habits, his voice calm but precise, reminding her why she had trusted his intellect and why she felt suddenly betrayed by reality. She kept smiling, measured, her mind spinning with strategy and emotional calculus, her hand resting lightly on the notebook, ready to note any slip, any tell, any evidence that might confirm or contradict the revelation of identity. They spoke for over an hour, each carefully navigating the conversation, each aware of stakes that were invisible yet palpably heavy, until finally, Thomas checked his watch, standing slowly and offering a polite bow. "It was a pleasure," he said. She rose, masking the inner turmoil with a polite nod, her mind a whirlwind of calculations, possibilities, and consequences. She watched him leave, heart hammering, pulse racing, knowing that the man she had connected with intellectually was simultaneously the son of the rival publisher, that every word, smile, and gesture must now be filtered through a new lens of danger, desire, and professional caution. She sat back down, breathing slowly, allowing her mind to reel, aware that nothing would ever feel the same again, that anonymity had ended and reality had intruded with a force that would shape every next step, forcing her to navigate trust, intimacy, and corporate threats all at once, her mind already plotting strategies for future encounters, questions to ask, and lines to walk carefully in the delicate balance between emotion and reason, between personal longing and professional survival, knowing that the simple act of meeting someone she trusted had irrevocably altered the landscape of her life and work. After the meeting in the Latin Quarter, Sophie returned to her apartment, closing the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment, letting the city's muffled noises fade into background hum. She ran her fingers along the edge of her desk, feeling the weight of the revelation. Thomas Dupont, the man she had built weeks of trust with, was the son of the very publisher whose ambitions threatened her agency. She poured herself a cup of coffee, stirring slowly, watching steam curl into the dim morning light. Filtering through her window, the thought of him sitting casually across from her, smiling, intellectually alive, yet carrying the legacy of corporate danger, twisted her stomach with unease. She opened her laptop, checking the forum, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to write, reach out, try to process the collision of professional caution and personal curiosity, of intellectual connection versus inherited enmity. She typed slowly. "Today changed everything that I saw you. Finally, understand. More than I wanted to." The reply came moments later, measured, careful, acknowledging both distance and presence. "I know that I hoped you would be surprised by nothing, only by the words we shared." Sophie exhaled, reading his lines. She felt the pull of fascination and fear intertwined, her mind replaying each glance, each phrase exchanged across the cafe table, the light in his eyes, the subtle nuances of posture that had told her more than words. She thought of the manuscripts awaiting her attention, the delicate narratives she had edited, unseen and uncredited, each one a testament to control, discipline, and invisibility. She realized that in Thomas she had encountered a mind as disciplined and deliberate as her own, yet one carrying a legacy she could not ignore. Sophie began to write, carefully, strategically, each sentence chosen to maintain the fragile bridge between professional caution and personal curiosity. "We cannot pretend nothing has changed. I see your face now. I see your name that I know what it means. But the connection between us, it is real, even if complicated." The reply was almost immediate. "Complicated is the only honest way forward. I cannot change who I am, who my family is, but I will not let that destroy what we have built." Sophie read the words slowly, heart tightening with cautious hope and dread. She realized that boundaries would have to be tested, trust negotiated, plans hidden behind careful wording. They began arranging clandestine meetings, not in public cafes, not in areas easily observed, selecting narrow streets, quiet bookstores, hidden courtyards where conversation could flow unobserved. They spoke of literature, of Paris, of their lives, while simultaneously gauging each other's caution, each gesture, each word, layered with subtle meaning, signaling both affection and discretion. Sophie noted every movement. Thomas noted hers, each aware of the stakes, her professional career, his family legacy, their shared curiosity and attraction. Both understood the dangers, colleagues who might recognize them, industry insiders who would exploit any perceived alliance, paparazzi waiting for a scandal, corporate strategies intertwined with personal interaction. Each message sent through the forum now carried double weight. Practical coordination and personal disclosure, coded in a way that only they could decipher. They met at dusk in a quiet bookstore hidden down a side street, the scent of old paper and polished wood wrapping around them as they moved between shelves. Sophie felt the thrill of proximity without exposure, seeing him among rows of books that smelled of history and creativity, his voice low. Each sentence chosen to maintain calm and concealment. He observed her attentiveness to the books, her careful fingers tracing spines, her eyes scanning titles she might recommend or already knew, noting habits that revealed both intellect and care, her professional precision translating into personal grace. They shared a quiet meal in a small bistro nearby, sitting where no one would notice them, speaking in tones low enough to remain private, their conversation dancing between observation, philosophy, literary critique, and the strange intimacy of shared secrecy. They laughed once, softly, lightly, a sound almost stolen from the city, and Sophie felt the tension ease for a fleeting moment, her chest lighter, mind aware yet slightly unburdened. This intimacy was dangerous, yet intoxicating, each meeting layered with the thrill of being observed yet unseen, connected yet anonymous to the wider world. They continued to exchange messages, notes hidden in innocuous book, purchases, words encrypted in literary references, each confirming a bond that neither wanted to name publicly, each navigating boundaries drawn by legacy, profession, and growing personal desire. Sophie felt the duality within herself, the rational mind, careful and disciplined, and the emergent emotional pull toward a man whose intellect, conversation, and presence challenged every notion she had about control, trust, and affection. Her nights were restless, filled with editing manuscripts, replaying encounters, analyzing conversations, decoding subtle gestures, preparing for the next meeting, balancing professional vigilance with personal curiosity. She realized that every step forward would require calculation, strategy, and careful concealment. Yet each step drew her closer to a reality she had not expected, one where intellectual connection and emotional engagement collided with the legacies that defined them both. Sophie arrived at Beaufort Literary Agency on Monday, her awareness of the digital infrastructure sharpened by years of managing encrypted submissions. She moved through the lobby, noting the security codes with a new, technical scrutiny, her role as lead editor now indistinguishable from that of a guardian of intellectual property. The forum notification blinked, but the tone of North Atlas had sharpened. "The board is moving. Expect pressure on the Beaufort manuscript," he wrote, his insight too specific to be mere literary theory. Sophie stared at the screen, the realization hardening. He wasn't just observing the industry. He was reporting from the enemy's war room. She typed back with clinical precision. Protocols tightened. "I'm tracking the leak sources now. Testing if he would flinch at the mention of internal betrayal at AS." She set the phone aside. Jean Beaufort approached, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the room with measured authority. "Sophie, we're counting on you more than ever. This manuscript must reach print intact, and no mistakes." She nodded, her mind already moving through contingencies, her awareness sharpened by weeks of dual focus, professional vigilance and clandestine personal connection. Outside, Paris moved indifferently, traffic weaving through rain-slicked streets, the distant hum of the city masking the invisible tension that filled the agency's corridors. Every phone call she made, every courier check, was executed with precision, her mind cataloging who had access, who had seen the manuscript, who could inadvertently expose it. She noted the subtle expressions of her colleagues, the quick glances, the slight hesitation in movement, interpreting them as either diligence or potential risk. Thomas, across the city, felt the pull of obligation and curiosity in equal measure. He had been called to assume a role within his father's company as vice president, immersed in strategy meetings, financial forecasts, and corporate maneuvers designed to pressure Beaufort Literary Agency into compliance. He listened to his father, Mark Dupont, delivering instructions with calm authority, his tone hiding the coercion and strategic intent beneath. That it was a plan to acquire Beaufort at any cost. And Thomas was now caught between loyalty to family, personal ethics, and the growing attachment he felt for Sophie. He observed her activity remotely through industry contacts, forums, updates, and discreet inquiries, tracking every movement, deciding when to act and when to withhold action. His moral calculus battled with strategic necessity, intervene and risk exposure, or remain silent and allow potential disaster. She coordinated the manuscript's movement meticulously, verifying each courier, checking documentation, ensuring that no unverified individual could access the work. Her awareness extended to subtle risks: photographers outside the building, unfamiliar delivery personnel, curious interns, everything that could compromise security. She felt the weight of responsibility in every gesture, every glance, knowing that one slip could result in disaster for the agency and herself, professionally and personally. She replayed the cafe meeting with Thomas Dupont's name echoing in her mind, and the tension it created between professional vigilance and emotional pull. She was aware that this duality could cloud judgment, yet she maintained focus on immediate tasks, balancing discretion with operational necessity. The day progressed with careful observation, silent coordination, her every move calculated for maximum security and minimal exposure. Emails were encrypted, phone calls brief, conversations controlled. Sophie became the fulcrum upon which the safety of the manuscript rested. Her internal monologue weighed risk versus intuition, trust versus necessity, each decision informed by experience and by the unspoken lessons learned from prior encounters with Thomas. Outside, her mind occasionally drifted to his messages, the warmth and intellectual connection juxtaposed against the potential threat his family represented. Every meeting she scheduled, every verification she conducted, was layered with the knowledge that the man she was drawn to was simultaneously entwined with the forces that could destroy her work and her career. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the agency windows, Sophie checked the final courier transport, confirming secure delivery and personnel accountability. She exhaled lightly, allowing the faintest sense of relief, even as tension remained taut, knowing that tomorrow would demand vigilance once more. That every step forward carried the weight of professional obligation, personal attachment, and the ever-present shadow of Dupont influence. The delicate balance of trust, skill, and strategy had shifted, her days and nights now interwoven with both professional precision and emotional complexity, setting the stage for conflicts, decisions, loyalties, all under the unrelenting pressure of corporate scrutiny and personal desire. By midweek, Sophie began noticing subtle changes in Thomas' messages, his words more measured, occasional delays in replies, small pauses that suggested thought or hesitation. She felt the shift immediately, her intuition honed by years of editing and observing, noticing patterns, discrepancies, and the faintest irregularities. He mentioned details of his work with Dupont Publishing casually, allowing her glimpses into meetings, strategies, and plans, sometimes veiled in neutral language, but Sophie sensed the weight behind them. One evening, she overheard a conversation in the forum he had joined briefly with colleagues about an upcoming acquisition, his tone cautious but revealing. She realized with a jolt that Thomas had been present when his father, Mark Dupont, spoke of aggressive maneuvers to acquire Beaufort Literary Agency. The knowledge struck her with sharp clarity. Everything she had coordinated, every security measure implemented, was now under potential threat from someone she cared for deeply. She felt a tight knot of anxiety and disbelief, chest pressing with the urge to confront or retreat, unable to reconcile the man she trusted with the reality of his familial ties. Her nights became restless, filled with calculations of potential risk, anticipation of next moves, and analysis of every word exchanged. The manuscripts in her care suddenly seemed more vulnerable, her responsibility heavier. Her professional vigilance now intertwined with personal stakes. She began to watch Thomas' patterns subtly, without overtly reaching out, noting inconsistencies, hesitations, curious absences, all while maintaining outward composure at the agency. The staff noticed little, seeing only her characteristic focus, her meticulous care in handling projects, unaware that each decision carried emotional as well as professional consequences. She spent hours cross-referencing schedules, tracking courier routes, verifying protocols, each calculation doubled by concern for the man whose intelligence she admired yet whose family posed existential risk. Thomas himself wrestled with the dilemma. He had heard the plan for the hostile acquisition and was torn between loyalty to his father and the instinct to protect Sophie. He observed her from a distance, analyzing her reactions, her behavior, reading subtle cues in her public movements and private messages. Aware that any misstep could destroy both trust and personal connection, he debated intervention, unsure whether to warn her and risk exposure or remain silent and allow events to unfold. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, the collision of love, intellect, and familial obligation demanding impossible choices. Sophie began encoding messages subtly, testing responses, reading between lines, probing the honesty of Thomas' intentions, careful not to reveal suspicion overtly. She found herself analyzing their interactions, searching for evidence of manipulation, misalignment, or betrayal, while simultaneously recalling moments of genuine connection, the shared laughter, the intellectual exchange, the quiet intensity of mutual understanding. She struggled to maintain equilibrium, balancing professional vigilance, emotional restraint, and cautious curiosity, her mind racing with scenarios, contingencies, probabilities, and consequences. Each day became a careful choreography, her work uninterrupted in appearance but laden with internal calculations, tracking potential threats, observing colleagues, analyzing communication, all while navigating the delicate terrain of a relationship built on trust and risk. Thomas sent messages intermittently, his tone controlled, sometimes distant, sometimes intimate, careful to reveal nothing that could jeopardize Sophie's perception of him. Her responses were measured, carefully neutral, concealing the storm of uncertainty, fear, and attraction roiling beneath the surface. She realized the complexity of their bond, how affection intertwined with caution, trust tested by circumstance, connection layered with danger. She spent long hours contemplating the ethical and emotional implications, questioning how much could be revealed, how much could be inferred, how to protect both the manuscripts and the fragile trust forming between them. Every message, meeting, gesture was now weighed against multiple scales: professional duty, personal desire, strategic necessity, and the invisible influence of Mark Dupont looming over their interactions. The internal conflict escalated, forcing Sophie to reconcile admiration with caution, love with vigilance, intellect with instinct, her mind a battlefield of priorities, each demanding attention, each carrying potential consequences for careers, relationships, personal integrity, and the fragile possibility of shared trust. She wrote coded notes to herself, drafting strategies for safeguarding the agency, for protecting her emotional boundaries, for interpreting Thomas' intentions, each plan layered with contingencies, each reflecting the intersection of professional skill and personal vulnerability. As she lay awake at night, Paris silent outside, her thoughts circled endlessly, calculating probabilities, weighing potential betrayals, assessing risk, and imagining paths forward. She understood, with unerring clarity, that the days ahead would test not only her professional acumen, but her emotional resilience, that trust would be fragile, that deception could lurk in subtle tones, that every word exchanged carried layers of meaning. She was determined to navigate this complexity, maintaining integrity, protecting the agency, preserving her emerging bond with Thomas, all while aware that one misstep could unravel everything she had built, all while feeling the simultaneous pull of fear, curiosity, and undeniable connection that made every decision both urgent and perilous. Mark Dupont had been watching for weeks, his private investigators' reports arriving each morning like clockwork, detailing movements, meetings, and behaviors at Beaufort Literary Agency. He studied every report meticulously, noting Sophie Laurent's disciplined routines, her handling of sensitive manuscripts, her coded exchanges on forums, and the subtle patterns of communication with his son, Thomas. He had known for some time that Thomas had formed a bond with Sophie, initially dismissing it as trivial, an innocent intellectual curiosity. But as days passed, it became clear that the connection ran deeper than he had anticipated, blurring the lines between professional interest and personal attachment. Using the information collected, Mark began to orchestrate a subtle plan, careful to manipulate without overt interference. Aware that too direct an approach might provoke resistance from his son or compromise his objectives, Mark bypassed the crude tactic of fake letters, instead authorizing a shadow acquisition of Beaufort's primary cloud server. He didn't just fabricate evidence. He altered the metadata of Sophie's own revisions, timestamping her private edits to coincide with anonymous leaks sent to rival houses. The digital trail was flawless, making her editorial precision look like a calculated betrayal of the agency's most valuable intellectual property. Thomas, preoccupied with his own internal conflict, was unaware of the full scope of his father's maneuvering, receiving only fragments of information and subtle pressure that his father's presence and authority implied. He began noticing discrepancies in Sophie's behavior, her careful secrecy, her strategic pauses, hesitations that could be interpreted as guilt rather than prudence. Over the next days, Mark's plan unfolded in layers, subtle hints dropped into industry chatter, rumors seeded among less attentive colleagues, small questions raised about her loyalty disguised as professional curiosity. Every interaction Sophie had, every message she sent to Thomas, was now filtered through suspicion not her own, but that implanted externally, forcing her to second-guess intentions, interpret behavior, measure trust against engineered deception. She found herself pausing, hesitating, reading between lines, aware that someone, somewhere, was manipulating perceptions, turning normal vigilance into heightened paranoia. Thomas began noticing Sophie's subtle withdrawal, her careful framing of words, her distant expressions in forum exchanges and clandestine meetings. He felt the rising tension like a weight pressing on his chest, unsure whether it was consequence of his own withheld knowledge of the Dupont plans or her perception of betrayal. Each private message he sent was measured, careful, testing reactions, his internal calculations balancing familial loyalty, professional ethics, and emerging personal attachment. His father's influence, though unseen directly in the interactions, loomed over every decision. Sophie's confidence in her own judgment, her ability to navigate corporate and emotional complexities challenged by engineered uncertainty. Every subtle gesture, Sophie noted, an inflection, hesitation, an overlooked detail, interpreted as potential duplicity, as she weighed trust against circumstantial evidence, her mind mapping probabilities, scenarios, consequences, all while maintaining composure at work and during secret meetings. Through quiet observation and analysis, she began constructing mental algorithms, tracking access, calculating possible manipulation, preparing contingencies for every eventuality. The presence of external influence, unseen yet palpable, added tension to clandestine meetings with Thomas, their intellectual exchanges now layered with suspicion, questioning, subtle testing of sincerity, and deliberate signals designed to detect deception. Her emotional landscape shifted subtly, carefully balanced between attraction, trust, professional vigilance, and the possibility of betrayal engineered by external forces. Thomas, unaware of the full deception, experienced increasing cognitive dissonance, interpreting Sophie's caution and subtle withdrawal as evidence of disengagement or mistrust, feeling both frustration and concern, weighing action against restraint, desiring clarity while constrained by circumstance. That Mark's manipulation created a silent battlefield, invisible to all but those deeply attuned to behavior, communications, and psychological nuance. Sophie, her mind sharpened by experience and instinct, recognized anomalies but could not yet identify their source, each discovery reinforcing caution while simultaneously igniting suspicion and tension. Her dedication to the agency, to the manuscript, combined with emerging emotional attachment to Thomas, created a complex matrix of priorities, each decision fraught with risk, each interaction layered with multiple potential meanings. The weeks passed with delicate maneuvers, subtle tests, and careful observation, each character playing roles dictated by loyalty, desire, strategic necessity, and the invisible hand of Mark Dupont. The tension escalated, unseen yet omnipresent, as Sophie and Thomas navigated their clandestine connection, intellectual intimacy, professional responsibility, all under the silent orchestration of a father whose manipulation would push them toward critical decisions, tests of loyalty, and revelations that would reshape both personal and professional landscapes. The probe for confirmation of rumors, Sophie responding with measured neutrality, careful phrasing, protecting both herself and the manuscript while deflecting insinuations effectively. But the cloud of suspicion lingered, visible to those with industry knowledge and invisible to casual observers. The climax of the event occurred when an internal report flagged irregular access to the manuscript metadata, implying unauthorized exposure. To Sophie's mind raced. She traced logs, verified every step, cross-checked communications, and discovered that the anomalies were engineered, misleading indicators designed to implicate her specifically. She realized with grim clarity that the fair, though physically secure, had been transformed into a professional gauntlet, where perception, misinformation, psychological pressure, and manipulated circumstances converged to threaten her reputation and career simultaneously. She maintained composure, executing countermeasures, documenting anomalies, communicating only with trusted colleagues, and coordinating responses, all while navigating the physical, emotional, and psychological pressures of the environment. She felt exhaustion, focus, alarm, and strategic calculation intertwining, each decision fraught with consequences beyond immediate control. Yet beneath the professional vigilance, emotional strain, personal attachment to Thomas, looming familial manipulation. Her intellect and discipline remained sharp, calculating next steps, mitigating damage, maintaining operational control, ensuring that the manuscript remained physically secure, while her reputation teetered on the edge of scandal, visibility of her integrity hanging on precise, unobservable actions amidst the chaos and engineered perception of professional failure. The evening after the Frankfurt Book Fair, Sophie sat alone in her apartment, lights dim, Paris skyline a blur through the rain-streaked windows, her hands shaking slightly as she reviewed messages, emails, and internal communications that documented the chaos of the day. The agency had suspended her temporarily, pending investigation, leaving her reputation hanging in uncertainty, rumors circulating, whispers amplified by industry contacts and social media echoes. Her mind replayed every interaction at the fair, every subtle manipulation, each carefully orchestrated moment designed to cast doubt on her integrity, her control, her professionalism. She felt a cold weight settle over her chest, a mixture of anger, grief, and disbelief, her intellect racing to reconcile the trust she had placed in Thomas with the engineered circumstances that suggested betrayal. Her phone buzzed quietly, a single message from Thomas. Brief, simple, "We need to talk." She stared at it, a whirlwind of emotion tightening her stomach, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, hesitating. She typed slowly, carefully, each word measured against fear, trust, and anger. "You knew and said nothing. Sophie is accused because of your silence." The reply came almost immediately, but the tone carried restraint, urgency, conflict. "I did not act against you. Silence was my prison. Only now can I explain." She read the words, her chest tight, heart pounding, realizing that the man she had trusted, the one whose intellect and connection had become a lifeline, was now both victim and participant in her unraveling. She felt the past weeks, the secret meetings, the coded messages, the intellectual intimacy, collide violently with professional catastrophe, the bond she had nurtured now strained to breaking. She arranged to meet him in the quiet courtyard of a hidden bookstore, away from prying eyes, her steps deliberate, mind calculating every potential confrontation, her emotions raw yet controlled. She arrived first, Thomas appearing moments later, coat damp from rain, expression taut with urgency and regret. Sophie, he began, voice low, eyes avoiding hers initially, before meeting them with restrained intensity. I never wanted this, I never wanted you to be hurt. She studied him closely, noting subtle shifts in posture, inflection, gesture, all betraying the conflict between familial duty and personal integrity. You could have warned me, she said, voice steady despite rising emotion. You could have protected me, he countered, his words tense, careful, truth and guilt interwoven. I trusted you, she said, heart heavy with betrayal and lingering affection, each word measured to convey both reproach and unresolved connection. And I am devastated that trust was compromised, he replied, his eyes searching hers for understanding, for forgiveness, for acknowledgement that his position was constrained, that the source of manipulation lay with his father. Powerless is a choice, Thomas. You chose the shadow of your father's desk over the truth, she countered, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He didn't lean back. He met her gaze with a weary, clinical honesty. My father didn't just plant rumors, Sophie. He bought the server nodes Beaufort uses. He didn't need me to leak anything, because he owned the pipes the information flowed through. I wasn't just silent. I was trying to build a firewall from the inside without him realizing I was the one patching your vulnerabilities. Sophie absorbed the confession, silence hanging between them, heavy with betrayal, relief, anger, and residual attachment. She exhaled slowly, processing the revelation, the magnitude of deception, her professional reputation compromised by forces beyond her control, her trust in Thomas challenged yet partially vindicated by his disclosure. They spoke for hours, careful yet raw, analyzing each misstep, each manipulated detail, each action that had led to the crisis, their words a blend of intellect and emotion, strategic analysis and personal reckoning. Sophie confronted her own emotions, the lingering affection, the hurt, the anger, the professional indignation, balancing them against the practical reality of external manipulation, of the agency's needs, of her personal boundaries. Thomas, for his part, acknowledged his failures, his silence, his inability to act sooner, yet expressed determination to correct the record, to restore both integrity and connection, aware that forgiveness would not be immediate, that trust must be rebuilt meticulously and deliberately. Sophie left the meeting that night with a mind racing, heart heavy yet clear, understanding that resolution would require deliberate action, strategic intervention, and emotional recalibration. She began to plan, carefully, step by step, how to reclaim her professional standing, how to protect the manuscript and the agency, how to navigate the ongoing personal relationship with Thomas, now complicated by betrayal and partial vindication. Each thought was layered with contingency, each intention filtered through reason, emotion, and awareness of ongoing corporate and familial manipulation. The night stretched on, Paris quiet outside, her apartment a sanctuary and a battlefield simultaneously. She poised between reflection and action, knowing that the days ahead would demand strategic brilliance, emotional resilience, and careful navigation of both professional and personal domains. Thomas spent the following days navigating a maze of corporate influence, legal documentation, and carefully curated disclosures, his mind focused on one goal: exposing the orchestrated manipulation of Mark Dupont and restoring Sophie's professional integrity. He began by gathering evidence from internal communications, server logs, delivery records, emails, encrypted messages, and meeting transcripts, meticulously cross-referencing every detail to construct an irrefutable chain of causality that he reached out to trusted colleagues within DuPont Publishing discreetly, requesting confirmation of dates, actions, and instructions, each interaction coded and carefully phrased to avoid detection by his father or external observers. He utilized a forensic audit of the DuPont cloud infrastructure, identifying the specific admin credentials used to timestamp the metadata shifts on Sophie's files. It wasn't just a collection of rumors. It was a technical map of the intrusion. He extracted the command and control logs that proved the leaks originated from a DuPont-owned terminal, effectively turning his father's sophisticated surveillance network into the primary evidence of his own corporate sabotage. The dossier contained high-level authentication logs that made the fraud undeniable to the Beaufort board and legal authorities alike. He then coordinated with Beaufort Literary Agency's board and legal advisors, presenting evidence in controlled sessions, layering the presentation to allow gradual realization of the orchestrated deception, ensuring each participant understood the scope, precision, and intentionality of the manipulative actions. He remained in constant communication with Sophie, updating her on progress, her involvement limited to strategic oversight and validation, maintaining emotional equilibrium while she monitored the reconstruction of her professional reputation. Sophie, meanwhile, focused on reinforcing internal processes, verifying security protocols, documenting her actions, clarifying communications, and preparing for public disclosure, all while processing the residual emotional complexity of trust, attachment, and betrayal. She reviewed Thomas' findings carefully, confirming timelines, verifying anomalies, and providing insight into the psychological and operational tactics used to manipulate her perception and colleagues' interpretations. Every interaction between them during this phase was precise, calculated, layered with professional necessity and personal reconciliation, as they rebuilt both trust and operational integrity step by step. Thomas arranged a controlled public statement, carefully scripted, where he presented evidence to industry stakeholders, legal representatives, media correspondents, and key colleagues, emphasizing the orchestrated nature of the deception, the deliberate fabrication of evidence, and the absolution of Sophie from any culpability. He emphasized transparency, professional ethics, and the structural flaws exploited by Mark Dupont, demonstrating both accountability and strategic clarity. Sophie did not merely watch the presentation. She provided the final, lethal link, a pattern recognition analysis of the metadata shifts that only an editor's eye for stylistic consistency could detect. She pointed out the digital fingerprints where the intruder had tried to mimic her syntax in the leaked fragments, making the fraud undeniable to the board. The aftermath involved carefully managed internal communications, private debriefings with colleagues, legal confirmations, media clarifications, and reinforcement of security protocols to prevent recurrence of manipulation. Sophie assumed a central role in these processes, her insight into procedural vulnerabilities, combined with the validation of Thomas' evidence, establishing her authority and professionalism unequivocally. The duo met privately, reflecting on the ordeal, assessing lessons learned, and planning future safeguards, both operational and relational. The lessons learned from deception, misinformation, loyalty conflicts, and strategic manipulation became a blueprint for both professional and personal decision-making, ensuring resilience, awareness, precision, and deliberate emotional and operational control moving forward. The cafe in the Latin Quarter was quiet that morning, soft lights spilling across worn wooden tables, coffee steam rising in gentle curls, Paris moving at its own unhurried pace outside the windows. Sophie arrived first, her steps measured, heart steady but alert, mind cataloging every detail, anticipating movements, observing patrons with professional vigilance tempered by personal calm. She chose a table near the corner, not isolated yet private enough for conversation, arranging her notebook, tablet, and a small pile of manuscript drafts with deliberate care, each placement reflecting habitual order, discipline, and subtle aesthetic awareness. Thomas arrived moments later, coat damp from morning drizzle, expression relaxed yet focused, eyes scanning briefly before settling on Sophie, recognition and warmth mingling in his gaze as he moved to the table, placing his briefcase beside the chair, allowing his presence to establish a shared space of security, trust, and mutual engagement. "Morning," he said softly, voice low but clear, with a subtle smile. She looked up, not just as a partner, but as the primary architect of their new infrastructure, her confidence rooted in the absolute severance of the Dupont lineage from their data. The conversation began with small talk, muted observations of the street, brief reflections on weather and Parisian rhythms, each exchange layered with deliberate pacing, allowing both to ease into dialogue without immediately invoking emotional turbulence. They discussed literature. First, an easy common ground, manuscript ideas, plot structures, character arcs, and narrative tension, each comment reflecting expertise, thoughtfulness, and shared intellectual affinity. As the conversation progressed, Sophie opened the notebook, flipping to pages of her own early drafts, carefully annotated, ideas for a new small publishing venture designed to prioritize creative freedom, integrity, authorial collaboration, and operational independence. She explained each concept, her vision precise, strategic, and deliberate, reflecting lessons learned from prior corporate entanglements, misinformation campaigns, and professional manipulation. Thomas listened attentively, interjecting with insights on market positioning, distribution, editorial workflows, and operational safeguards, each suggestion reinforcing collaboration while maintaining respect for Sophie's autonomy, her authority, her vision. They discussed logistical frameworks, potential author engagement strategies, contractual structures, marketing approaches, all while maintaining the intimacy of shared creativity and mutual intellectual stimulation. The cafe ambience became a cocoon of focus and connection, soft murmurs and clinking cups providing a gentle backdrop to an evolving partnership rooted in trust, experience, shared values, and emotional transparency. She didn't just look up. She presented a hard-encrypted drive containing their new operational charter, a legal and technical firewall designed to lock Mark Dupont out of their future. It wasn't just a discussion of literary theory. It was a deployment of a decentralized publishing model where the authors held the keys and the editors provided the armor. Thomas scrutinized the architecture, his nod of agreement less about affection and more about a shared, lethal understanding of the industry's new rules. The dialogue extended into discussions of future goals, author relationships, innovative publishing models, market research, distribution channels, and protective measures for intellectual property, each layer reflecting strategic sophistication, emotional intelligence, and collaborative synergy. The morning stretched into early afternoon, lights shifting. Across the cafe, soft shadows marking the passage of time, yet both remained absorbed in planning, review, discussion, connection, trust, each gesture reinforcing the new dynamic of mutual respect, personal authenticity, professional alignment, and emotional equilibrium. The final logistical hurdle was cleared when Thomas transferred the ownership of the newly acquired server nodes to Sophie's name, effectively severing the Dupont lineage from their data. This wasn't a gesture of romance, but of structural equilibrium. They sat in the fading light, two strategists who had dismantled an empire to build a sanctuary, knowing that their connection was no longer a vulnerability to be exploited, but the very source of their immunity. To new beginnings, Thomas said, raising his cup slightly. Eyes meeting hers, Sophie smiled, mirroring the gesture, voice steady yet warm. To new beginnings. The city outside moved onward, indifferent yet alive, while within the cafe, a partnership both professional and personal began anew, rooted in experience, strategic collaboration, emotional honesty, mutual respect, and the deliberate freedom to create, plan, and trust without interference, threat, or manipulation. The first manuscript for their joint venture lay open between them, its pages a testament to creativity, collaboration, independence, and resilience, each mark, annotation, and note reflecting lessons learned from professional adversity, personal trials, strategic maneuvering, emotional complexity, trust rebuilt, boundaries defined, autonomy preserved, and the deliberate choice to pursue shared vision and partnership free from external influence, corporate entanglement, or familial manipulation.